international press is headlining on today. William Hildebrand is back. Grabbing a lot of headlines, of course, are those commemorations for the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide.
That's right. I'd like to begin by looking at a piece on Slate that talks about some of the weight Rwandans are feeling in the run-up to this event. It begins with a story about a man who's had to take his wife to the hospital twice this month. When she suffered flashbacks, she would cry and say the militias had come back. Now, many people say the commemoration masks the deep divisions within the country. Last year, the government, led by President Kagame, a Tutsi, ran a campaign called I Am Rwandan, where Hutus born after the genocide apologize in the name of their ethnic group. And critics say the government is suffering from ethnic amnesia and that its one-sided narrative of events makes it difficult to bury the past. And that's an idea that was also picked up by the Irish Times, which said that public dissent in the country is minimal. And it spoke to an aid worker who used to work for Human Rights Watch within the country, and she said the government has tried to build stability and peace on the basis of silence and fear. It also spoke to a Rwandan living in Ireland who fears that there will be a lot of bloodshed when Kagame leaves his office in 2017 when his term limit's up, and she fears it could even be worse than it was in 1994.
Now, a lot of headlines, though, have been focusing on some of the positive changes in Rwanda in those 20 years since its genocide.
That's right. We're seeing a lot of encouraging sentiment in the headlines. The Daily Telegraph runs a 2-page spread. Rwanda, land of hope, not hatred. It says the irony of world leaders attending the memorial will not be lost on President Kagame. The world did little to help in 1994, but it goes on to praise him for using billions in aid money that came in from guilt-ridden donors following the genocide to rebuild the country. And it's a similar take from Tony Blair, who wrote in The Guardian that Rwanda's healing. He says the economy has been growing over the past decade. Most people have health insurance and crime is low, but it's a long way off from reaching its goal of being a middle-income country by 2020.
Now, a lot of paper is saying there's a lesson to be learned from all this and that history mustn't be allowed to repeat itself.
That's right. The Independent says it even makes a case for intervention. It says that France's decision to pull out of the commemoration would be tragic if it overshadows the significance of this anniversary. France's role was murky in the horrific events, it says, but the whole world stood by, and that the world should learn that there are times when outside intervention is the only way to stop carnage. Now, on Huffington Post, British Foreign Secretary William Hague tries to develop upon this idea. He says there's been a gap between commitments governments make and the actions they take to intervene. And he says he points a finger at conflicts in Syria, the Central African Republic, and Sudan and South Sudan, saying more must be done in these areas now.
Now, we're going to move on to another of our top stories this morning, Will, which is the Indian election and the world's biggest vote, which is now underway.
That's right. And Britain's Guardian is running a spread. It says cracks are starting to show in the Gandhi dynasty's heartland. And to get an idea of the scale of the election, there are 800 million voters out of a population of 1.2 billion people. And the piece says the Gandhi family will remain a force, but that it could see the biggest defeats it's seen, and great changes are sweeping across the country. The world's biggest democratic exercise got a little bit more democratic after more than 50 years. Tibetans living in exile in India got voting rights, but it hasn't been without a hitch. The Indian Express says with no voter cards, Tibetans have to wait to cast their votes. It's largely because of bureaucratic paperwork. Officials say they simply don't have the resources to process all the new information, largely dealing with birth certificates. And Tibetans say they've been given little guidance.
And we end with a story about toilets, a story that comes to us from Japan.
That's right. So Slate has a first-hand account of an American trying a Japanese toilet for the first time. And with remote controls, heated seats, bidet functions, and sounds to obscure less desirable sounds, he says it transforms the act of excretion into a technologically enhanced pleasure ritual. And Americans are living in the past, and he says the bathroom could be a realm of surprise and delight. And I'm wondering if our bosses might put some of those in here at work.
I think that's exactly what we're lacking in the newsroom. Thank you very much indeed, William Hildebrand, with a look there at the international press. It is 26 minutes past 9. In just a moment, I'll be back with the headlines. We'll also be getting the latest in focus. We'll be heading to the town that was once known as Kibuye on the shores of Lake Kivu, where one of the worst atrocities of the Rwandan genocide took place. Our correspondents traveled to the town, now called Karongi, to meet some of those who remember.